Does questioning Donald Trump make you anti-MAGA? Yeah, let's talk about that.
Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're on issues they care about. Welcome to The Brian Nichols Show.
Well, hey there, folks. Brian Nichols here on another fun-filled episode of The Brian Nichols Show. I am, as always, your humble host, joining you from our lovely Cardio Miracle Studios here in sunny Eastern Indiana. The Brian Nichols Show is brought to you by the best heart health supplement in the world, Cardio Miracle. So you want to learn how to lower your resting heart rate, lower your blood pressure while improving your pump at the gym. Stick around. We'll talk about that later in today's episode, or just go ahead and scan that little QR code over my shoulder and head right over to cardiomiracle.com. With that being said, let's dig into today's conversation. I've been hearing a lot of folks in the greater right-wing movements saying if you dare question or even pose any theories that Donald Trump might be wrong, you might be anti-MAGA. Is that true? I don't know, probably not. But let's go ahead and actually dig into this. Returning here to the Brian Nichols Show is our good buddy, Ethan Watson. Ethan, welcome back to the show. How you doing?
Pretty good, Brian. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely, man. Looking forward to today's conversation. Looking forward to having some fun. You've been a really fun recurring guest. I think this is round 3 of you here on the Brian Nichols Show, and I know every time we have you on, folks are always saying, "Ethan Watson, he's got some, he got some good points. He's got a good old noggin on his shoulders there." So, Ethan, do us a favor for the folks who are joining us for the first time post episode 1000. Do us a favor and introduce yourself here to the Brian Nichols Show audience. Who are you, and why are you focusing today on all the insanity happening on the right side of the political aisle?
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Ethan Watson. I'm a political commentator with the Young Voices program. I do media, I do op-eds, and I'm also a law student at Arizona State University. Beyond that, I am a staunch conservative young person, and I'm really interested in frankly concerned about some of the cracks I'm seeing forming in the right-wing, libertarian/conservative, anything that's not far left movement, and especially Trump's big tent party, which really carried the 2024 election. There's some cracks showing, and I'm a little concerned about it, which is why I'm here today.
Amen, buddy. Yeah, there's a lot of red flags that have been popping up there. I feel like we're on an episode of Jubilee. That's a highbrow joke for the folks who live perpetually online. But no, let's dig into this, right? Because you see right now there is a big split, and maybe this is because we're perpetually online, it feels like, right? But we see this probably more than folks in kind of the everyday average life, where a lot of the coalition that was brought together in 2024 to support Trump, it was from folks from all walks of life. And I actually think, was it Ben Shapiro? It was somebody who had made this point. And by the way, folks, don't take this as me supporting Ben Shapiro. I just crucified him in my last episode. So go check that out with Abdullah Hayek. But Ben Shapiro had pointed out that the group that voted for Donald Trump in 2024 wasn't necessarily a right-wing group, but rather they were a coalition of folks who were more anti-left. Right. Mm-hmm. And where we're at now is kind of the rubber hitting the road, where the right side of the political aisle, this anti-left coalition, is starting to, it's like, Jason Stapleton, a good friend of the show, he used to use the example, and I'm sure he, borrowed it from somewhere else, but, we're all in this big school bus in space, and we're going towards Libertopia, right? And we have your ANCAPs, your minarchists, your classical liberals, all, everybody on that big spaceship, that school bus in space. And if you need to get off on our way to Libertopia, go for it. But hey, we have to be traveling at least towards Libertopia to start, right? And it feels like, we in that same spirit, we're kind of on our way towards the anti-left. We're getting rid of wokeism. The leftism is definitely, I say definitely, it feels like it's getting more and more unpopular. But now more and more folks are starting to say, well, hey, where are we actually headed, right? And do I need to get off the bus? Is that what we're seeing here today, Ethan, or is there something else, some true cancerous thing behind the scenes that is starting to fester and really rear its ugly head?
Well, I really hope it's not some true cancerous, malignant tumor that's going to take down the MAGA movement. I like to use the term big tent party, right? You see that thrown around a lot. And we had the Maha Moms and the tech right bros and the podcast bros and Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson. Everybody was kind of on board with this, exactly like you said, this anti-left-wing coalition. And now the movement is trying to govern with all of these different ideas sort of floating around. And I think that's actually pretty good, right? When you have earnest, well-meaning voices from different sides that are in the president's ear. I think that's great because President Trump isn't an ideologue. Like, he doesn't have a set of ideologies or principles himself. He just likes to win and be praised, I think. And so when he has different voices in his head, or in his ear rather, telling him, here's what we think you should do, here's how you should handle this, I think you can get to a good policy position from that standpoint. But really what happened was President Trump won the 2024 election by taking the 80 side of every 80-20 issue.
Yep.
And that's why we built this great coalition. But recently he's been taking, at least on the online discourse side, the 20 side of things, like especially with Epstein. Iran, maybe it's a little bit more split, but that was more of a wedge issue. And when he starts deviating from those 80-20 issues, cracks start to show. And I think it's fine to have questions. There's decent reasons for striking Iran, and there's some really good, valid concerns about that strike as well. But the most concerning thing I saw was a contingent of Trump loyalists that were roaming the internet saying, I never once criticized him. I will remember you if you were a dissident here. And I'm making a list of all the people that were disloyal. It's like, what are you going to do with that list?
Are you channeling your inner cat turd there, Ethan? Come on.
Yeah, I am talking about cat turd, which is funny. You might like laugh and say, well, who cares what some guy named cat turd on Twitter says? But this person has millions of followers, right? And
I'll say a lot of people care. Yeah.
A lot. And you've got Laura Loomer, right, who again is sort of one of these Twitter gremlins, but on the same side, she's going to the White House to meet with the president. So she has influence.
Twitter gremlin, real life gremlin. I think she plays both roles there, if we're going to be honest.
Yeah. And sure, Loomer makes some good points every once in a while. Everyone does at some point, but you should call it out when these people are engaging in this gatekeeping behavior, which is really what sank the left. This sort of, ideological puritanism where if you disagree with me on one thing, you're off the island. I don't think that's a productive way to run a party.
Yep. If you're a new parent, you already know the feeling. Running on maybe 3 hours of sleep, chasing your kid before the coffee kicks in. It's like you're constantly in survival mode. And even if you do find time to eat clean or sneak in a workout, your body's just not operating at full speed. Stress, sleepless nights, and poor nutrition tank your nitric oxide levels, leaving you sluggish, foggy, and unfortunately snapping at the people you love the most. And trust me, I've been there. That's why I started using Cardio Miracle. That's a clean nitric oxide blend that supports energy, circulation, and mood with no caffeine crashes or stimulants. Just ingredients like organic beetroot, CoQ10, and L-arginine that naturally help you stay present, productive, and powered through parenthood. Trust me, this stuff helps you show up for your family. So, scan the little QR code over my shoulder, click the link in the show notes, or simply head to cardiomiracle.com/TBNS to give it a try. And by the way, when you go to cardiomiracle.com/TBNS, you're going to get a discount automatically applied at checkout. Just look for the little note saying you're shopping with Brian Nichols at the Cardio Miracle homepage. One more time, that's cardiomiracle.com/TBNS. And now, let's get back to the show. Yeah, you're off the island, and then let's take it a step further, right? You're a bad person. Right. And dude, like, man, I really saw this back in 2020, right? Like, a lot of folks who I thought were more just, normal folks, like moderate, centrist, independent thinking, whatever you want to, label them as. But there was a lot of folks who, when COVID hit, I saw that behind the scenes, like, vibe that they had really come out of, dude, if you're a threat, right, then you're the enemy, right? And you're not allowed on the island. And that was really concerning, right? Because it opened my eyes to how even some of the more like logical, reasonable people that I thought had critical thinking skills could be so taken over by the vibes and sentiment of the moment. And you fast forward to where we are today, it seems like that's, again, to your point, kind of exactly what we're talking about here, where it's like, it's the Anakin Skywalker standing there after he accidentally choked out Padme. And he's like, if you're not with me, you're my enemy, right? Like, that's where I feel a lot of the folks like the Laura Loomers and the cat turds of the world are. But Ethan, I'm going to call it out, right? Like, I think even despite all that, it feels like this mentality on the right is getting far more pushback than what we saw happen, in 2020 or even before from more folks in the squishy middle or even left, where despite Cat Turd and Laura Loomer and all their ilk saying these things, you have a lot of other folks on the other side of the, or not on the other side of the aisle, but in that coalition from 2024, like your Dave Smiths of the world, your Candace Owens of the world, they're standing up and fighting back and fighting the narrative. And I mean, man, I dare I say that they're actually fighting effectively, if not winning the battle, right? And it doesn't seem like this whole groupthink hive mentality has as much legs or stickiness as we saw on the left. Is that because the right is by and large more independent individualist thinkers, or is there something else that I'm missing here?
Well, I think absolutely the right is more predisposed to this heterodox thinking and individualism, personal responsibility, not being in a cult of personality. But I also think the sort of the Trump loyalists, the Cat Turds and the Hodge twins and the Laura Loomers, they don't have a lot of staying power because President Trump is done after this term, right? Like he's not going to run for president again. And so, attaching yourself to the man. Yeah, I mean, that's a good bit, but I mean, realistically, that's not going to happen, right? And
I'm just
realistically,
I know.
Realistically, Don Jr. is not going to be at the top of the ticket or something. So like the Trump name, the Trump brand is powerful and has done a lot of really good things for this movement. But eventually we're going to have to pass the torch. And that's why you need to be loyal to the ideology and to the policies and the platform. And really just at a baseline level, are you going to do things that make America great? That's really all I care about. And I don't care if it's Trump doing it or JD Vance or Vivek or Elon, or, I mean, Barack Obama had done great things to make America great. I would be supporting him. Like that's really the only litmus test I have here. But I think you see these like MAGA influencers with their whole brand, their whole online presence is I'm attached to Trump at the hip, and I retweet him, everything he says, and well done, Mr. President. Like it's a little nauseating, right? Like, come on, guys. You
so
talk
gross,
like this?
Dude.
Yeah, it's like Mr. President just smacked down the haters. It's like you don't talk like that. I don't talk like
just
that.
Call him daddy and call it a day. Good grief.
Right. Exactly. But they have like a financial interest and a reputational interest in never abandoning Trump because that's their audience. Their audience is like Trump sycophants and that way they're really just like Sean Hannity. I mean, there's not much difference between them. Is they always just agree with the party line, agree with the president, and those people are not the ones that are actually affecting good policy in this country. It's us, the dissidents, that have questions that move the president. And maybe we're getting some ground on this Epstein thing. Maybe we'll see Ghislaine Maxwell testify, for example. That's still up in the air, but we're the ones that are sort of balancing out the other wing, not the people that are constantly bootlicking.
So like this is where I am right now. Like that's great. Where do we go now though? Right? Because you see the Republican Party, and I'm going to put Trump at the top of that because he's the president, obviously, right? They are in the like low to mid 40% approval, which, you would stand to reason. Okay, well, Democrats are doing better, right? Nope. They're doing even worse. Their support is like in the low 20s, high teens. So like it's not the left, it's not the right. There seems to be a very large void right now in terms of people having some type of platform to not just voice their ideas, but voice them in such a way that it avoids this goofball like type of mentality where it's, again, the you're not with me, you must be my enemy mentality. Like, where does this bring us? And what do you see, Ethan, boots on the ground? You're a young folk, right? Like you talk to a lot more of the Gen Zers than I do. And that's because I'm an old fuddy-duddy, but I digress. But like you're out actually talking to folks. I mean, what's the vibe? Do you think that we're going to see like some third party or a taking over of one of the major two parties? Does Elon Musk's America Party or whatever the hell he called it, like, is that a viable option? Where do you think the younger voters are going to head?
Right. And, I talk to my friends about this all the time because I'm a huge politics dork. And I think everybody my age is just kind of fed up with both of the parties. Like everyone feels like nothing really changes. You see that like Wojak that comes around. It's like, oh, nothing ever happens. That's how we feel right now. There's never any change. Whether, whoever's in Washington, we're covering up for Epstein and we're bombing the Middle East. I mean, it's business as usual, right? Nothing ever happens. And I don't think the answer to that is a third party like Elon's America Party. I think that would be disastrous. And I think that would just ensure leftist hegemony for the next, decade. Honestly, I think that's an awful idea. But we as Republicans need to take advantage of this middle ground, this middle third, middle half of people that really don't like either party and say, well, there's room for you in our movement. You can ask questions. And even if we don't agree with you on everything, get with us on the 80 side of the 80-20 issues. That's how we won in 2024. And that's what made the first 100 days of this administration so successful, was because they were taking the 80 side of every 80-20 issue. We've lost the thread on that. We've stopped doing that. And that's driving people away now because they feel like nothing's getting done. But we need to welcome people back with open arms when they have questions. Like, it looks like maybe the Iran strike is going to work out. It's maybe too soon to tell. But I don't want to be called a fake Republican until the end of time because I questioned a Republican president on one aspect of their foreign policy. That seems ridiculous. And I think, you're the same way. You had questions about that. But voices like ours have a lot of value to add to the movement. And we should be welcomed back in and allowed to ask those questions and really meet us where we're at. Answer the question, explain why it's a good move, and don't just say trust the plan, because I'm tired of trusting the plan, because trusting the plan has not done anything. It hasn't changed anything. So articulate your positions, accept a little bit of disagreement, and work with each other on what we can work with each other on.
Yeah. And let me ask you this. This is maybe like the question behind the question, but like, where did this sentiment come from some of these folks, where if you disrupt the apple cart, that you're the bad person, right? Like we mentioned Cat Turd and Laura Loomer and a lot of these other, just like sycophants, right? I look at this and I'm like, I thought we were supposed to be by and large a movement of individuals, but there is this very much this collectivist mentality that a lot of these folks echo back on the right side of the political aisle. Where did this come from, Ethan?
Yeah, well, it's the true horseshoe theory of politics, right? Like at either end of the spectrum, you find yourself with collectivism and the evils that come with that. I think it's coming from President Trump, honestly, because President Trump has such a big personality. And I don't know if this is conscious or not, but he doesn't have any room for dissent. Like in his circle, like if you question him, you're out. You have to please him. And I think in a lot of ways,
you need to be loyal.
Right. Loyalty. And I'm loyal to the United States. I'm loyal to the Constitution. That's basically it. And President Trump has had a lot of success with this mentality, right? That's how he is a strong negotiator, and he's kind of a bully, but he can get things done because he has that mentality. But it also means that these people that attach themselves to him, they cannot afford to slip up and say one bad thing about President Trump or anyone he likes or any policy that he likes, because he could turn on them in an instant and cast them out like he did to Jeff Sessions and all those press secretaries in the first term. So it is coming from President Trump. And I think whether he means to or not, he's created sort of a cult of personality, and we need to be smarter than that and say, no, I'll support you when you do things I like, and I'll call it out when you do things that I don't like. And that's really as complicated as it needs to be. You shouldn't be afraid to be on Trump's bad side, even though that can hurt you. I don't think that hurts you as much as it used to. And really just call balls and strikes, guys. It's not much more complicated than that.
And let's, this translates, that's not the right word. It echoes. That's the word I was looking for. It echoes my conversation with Abdullah Hayek that we had last week, where we were talking about the young voter, right? The Gen Z, younger millennials, right? I would say under the age of 35. There is a growing distrust towards, to your point, the narrative, right? Like whatever, trust the plan, trust the process.
Right.
I feel like I'm the old, what was the coach there for the 76ers that was like, trust the process, right?
Right.
That seems like the same vibe. But we talked about how with the Palestinian-Israeli conflict over in the Gaza Strip, how you see the contrasting numbers of support for Israel from young voters versus, where it is today. It's night and day. You go from the mid 60% range down to now we're in the low 40s, high 30s for right-wing folks, right, in support of Israel. So we're seeing that the vibes are changing. And I guess, Ethan, I see that the Gallup polling numbers, I see the young voters, the young male Gen Zers especially, who are vastly more conservative right-wing than my generation or my parents' generation. But where does that lead us? It's not going to be this weird kind of GOP that we've found over the past 3-4 years that just kind of became this anti-left movement. These guys actually believe in true right-wing conservative principles. And I guess that's my underlying question is if that's where we are today, where will we be in 10 years when this sentiment starts to not just like manifest even more, but now these folks are more active participants in the voting process in our business world. Like these folks are going to be stakeholders like in our society. So what does that turn into?
Yeah, I think it could go one of two ways, right? Ideally, it'll go towards a reasserting of classical liberal values and kind of the founding values of our country, right? Allegiance to the Constitution, small government, free markets, and sort of community institutions. That's the good outcome here. The bad outcome is we get right-wing authoritarianism, where now you think we've been hurt so bad by the left that it's time to start wielding state power to impose our own viewpoints. And I think that just takes us down a really toxic path. I understand the instinct. I look at it and I want to see prosecutions and perp walks just like everybody else. But I think we need to be very careful to not let ourselves slip into another authoritarian moment of our own after we've seen the left do that.
Yep.
We need to win people over by changing hearts and minds, not by wielding state power. And I think there's a lot of young men, especially, that are very frustrated. You know, we look around and we see our country that's crumbling, overrun by foreign nationals. Our voting rights are being diluted by that, by the way. Rabbit hole I've been going down lately. Everything is more expensive. It's harder for us to start a family and buy a home. And it's very easy to be black-pilled if we're just going to keep using this online internet terminology here. It's very easy to be depressed about that and say, well, the solution is the state. The solution is the state should give me what I want. But that's not going to produce long-term flourishing. What's going to produce long-term flourishing is reasserting the founding of America and those founding ideas, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I really hope that young men my age can sort of suppress the bitterness and resentment that we feel and not become, a new wave of authoritarians just with under a different flag. I think that's a danger we have to watch out for.
Well, and hey, I mean, I don't want that either, but let's talk about that, right? Like what let's go to worst case scenarios. Like what do you think that would manifest itself as?
Right. I mean, that's just, authoritarian nationalism. And I think nationalism can be a useful tool in certain instances, right? Patriotism, support for your country, things like that. But when it comes to, redistributionism and sort of clamping down on the free markets to the extent that, we're going to have the state directing the economy and we don't like where housing prices are, for example. So we're just going to cram down price controls on it. But now, not from a liberal kind of lefty help the poor side, but from a right wing, we need to encourage nuclear family side of things. Either way, that has the same outcome. That wrecks an economy, right? And so I think and you see this sort of movement coming up with the woke right, where you have they're quoting Marx and they're saying, well, Marx's methods are actually pretty good. We just need to use them for ourselves. It's like, no, they're not. They're evil, actually, no matter who's saying it. And you also get a little bit of racial identitarianism coming out of it as well, right? It's very easy to see sort of the anti-white bent that our country seems to have with the DEI thing and to assert sort of a white nationalist angle on it. I hate using that word because it's such a club that they use to beat conservatives over the brow with, but you do start to see these fringe elements and that are espousing those views. And I think we need to be intentional about the movement we create. We want to make sure that it stays moral and stays grounded in fundamentally American principles.
If you're a business owner, do you ever open your phone bill and feel like you need a decoder ring? Regulatory recovery fee, support access surcharges, platform licensing. Half the stuff on there is just made up jargon for we felt like charging you more, and here it is. And don't worry, other folks are over it too. And that's why I am recommending you Level 365. They're upfront, no hidden fees, no surprise line items, no gains. You pay what you agreed to, period. And if you need help, a real human answers the phone. Clean pricing, real support. It shouldn't be revolutionary, but here we are. There we go. My mute just turned on. I don't know why. Okay. And I'm going to say his name and hopefully he doesn't appear like Beetlejuice, but Nick Fuentes, right? Like he represents a lot of the vibe that you're saying. And what happens is you have folks like Nick Fuentes who they will say the things that get the base riled up, right? It's very emotionally charged language. And let's call it for what it is. There are things that Nick Fuentes absolutely like articulates well and addresses properly. And that becomes kind of like the ground cover for him to then bring in a lot more of this more toxic mentality, because he uses that as the foundations for which to build an overarching ethos. And like this is how it, this is how I think the younger generation, they're not just buying the corporate narrative, right? That's how it used to work. This is why I think the younger generation, despite being more perpetually online, they are by and large more informed on the issues, but they're more informed on the issues relative to whatever source of information they're getting that information from, right? So you might be a Gen Zer who you were pretty agnostic to politics, and all of a sudden you stumble upon somebody like a Nick Fuentes, and you're like, oh my God, like he's absolutely crushing it on what he said was going to happen in Gaza, right, with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. What else is he right about, right? And then they start to just consume. That's the narrative. And then they become so well versed in that narrative, that thought process. And candidly, like, that's why we do things so differently here in the show. Like, I'm not sitting here and presenting myself as the source of truth. I'm having folks literally from all walks of life, like all political persuasions, which, by the way, there was a guy over on Twitter who he's been friendly with my show. His name is Jason. And I had posted this meme about, it was like all the different late night hosts and how they had a, just plethora of left-wing guests and then zero right-wing guests. And he had, tried to do a little like, attempted own. He's like, well, what's the breakdown of your guests, Brian? I'm like, well, honestly, if we're going to look at my guests, probably over 1,000 episodes, 40% more like libertarian-ish, maybe like 30-ish% more conservative. And then I would say like 25-ish% actual like Democrats or left-wing folks. So, thanks for trying to do a gotcha, but I feel like I pulled a Jordan Peterson. He was the Kathy Newman. I got to go, gotcha, right? So like, that's why I try to have a differing viewpoint on my show, because I don't want it to be like, hey, we're all singing from the same sheet of music, right? Like, that's great if you can build an audience in that spirit, but you're sacrificing at that point, like, intellectual diversity, not just for the sake of diversity, but for the sake of debate. I want to see iron sharpen iron. I want my ideas tested. I want their ideas tested out in the court of public opinion, and let the best ideas win. Specifically, just looking at this Israel-Gaza conflict, or Israel-Palestinian conflict in the Gaza Strip, like, I have had, I mean, literally like probably 15, 20 different folks on the show over the past 2 years. And I think it's like a straight cut down the middle in terms of pro-Zionist and then pro-Palestinian breakdown. Like, and by the way, if you listen to those episodes, I'm not trying to play like, like a narrative myself. I'm trying to play host. I'm trying to be like a good faith host. I'm not trying to pull the gotchas. I'm trying to have context. I'm going to ask tough questions. That's my job, right? But I'm not going to go in and just try to browbeat somebody. I'll let Dave Smith do that, right? That's his job. He can go and, go after the Douglas Murrays. He can go after the Alex Berensons. Go for it. Have fun doing that. Go after Josh Hammer. But if I were to ever have an interview with Dave, I'm not going to try to play the role of Josh Hammer, right? Just to play that role and test Dave. I'm going to try to have an open dialogue and actually pull facts, ask conflicting information, stuff like that. So I say all that. I see where we are today with a lot of the younger, Gen Z, and even a lot of Gen Alpha, right? Ethan, to that point, like they're getting their information from one or two folks. Let me turn this to you. Like, let's talk to Gen Z. Let's talk to Gen Alpha. You're a smart cookie, right? Which, by the way, is one of my daughter's favorite books. Like, you're a smart cookie, Ethan. What would you recommend to Gen Zers or Gen Alpha to get a true, like, smorgasbord, buffet, whatever you want to call it, cornucopia? Get a Fruit of the Loom, not cornucopia, right? Like, what would be the best way to get as much information and be a truly well-rounded consumer of news from your perspective to those younger constituents out there?
For sure. Yeah. So I've got a couple recommendations. First would be get outside and touch grass. Have a friend group that you talk politics with respectfully from across the political spectrum. And you're not just sitting around watching Nick Fuentes, because it's so easy to get riled up and spun up and resentful when that's all you consume. But I have friends from all across the political spectrum, far left guys, centrist guys, people that don't know anything about politics, which is kind of refreshing too sometimes. And every day we talk about different ideas and theories, and that's a respectful debate. And you have a better appreciation for other points of view when someone that you care about and like, whether it's a friend or a family member, is telling it to you. You're not as defensive. You don't slip into the provocateur sort of, I'm going to call you names and smear you. So I think that's the first thing, is have a friend group where people are different. Actually, that's pretty good. That's a good thing to have. And then the other thing, this might be a little bit out there. I'm going to say, go read something that's not directly related to modern politics. Read some history, read some philosophy, read the Bible, learn about the world you live in and the traditions you've inherited. That'll ground you. That's something that I've really been making an effort to do in this time before I start law school. And it has been so good. Yeah, it's just, first of all, it's good for your mental health, right? Like you feel happier and at peace when you know, okay, I'm part of this tradition. This is my country. I'm learning about the great men of history. And that gives you a context within which to have these debates. And for me, at least, it makes me feel a little bit better about where our country is, because we're in some growing pains right now, right? Things look pretty bad. But you go back and you read about sort of the arguments before we even had our revolution in this country. There was heated debate about whether we should stay British subjects or not. Like there was a split. It looked bad. And then after that, we had the slavery debate. We got through that together. Then we got through the civil rights movement together. Like we got through all of these horrible sort of fraught times in our history. And that gives me a lot of hope that this is just another growing pain, and that our foundational ideas are rock solid. But having an understanding of sort of history and how these movements work and how ideas play off each other, that makes you less susceptible to demagogues, whether it's Nick Fuentes or it's AOC, because they're not that different, frankly. They're kind of the same. They just say outrageous stuff to get young people riled up. And I think we need to be smarter than that. And you can do that by learning things for yourself. So those are my two recommendations for young people: is touch grass and get smart. I guess that would be it in a nutshell, which touch is, grass. Easier said than done.
Yeah. Touch grass and get smart. That's all you have to do. Get smart. Great movie, by the way. Steve Carell, Anne Hathaway, I think she was my first crush back when I was a kid, because back in the day, Princess Diaries, Ethan, that was like the coming of age movie for little Brian to say, I think I like pretty girls. Oh, wow. Okay. But that's a different conversation for maybe the wellness fix, which, by the way, folks, as we go towards the tail end of the episode, some housekeeping here. We have our show, the Brian Nichols Show, right? It's been going 1,000 episodes plus now. But after episode 1,000, we did some changes. So for folks who are like, where did the 3 episodes a week go? They're still there. They're just on different channels now. So the Brian Nichols Show proper, as we're doing here with Ethan today, that will air every Thursday on the Brian Nichols Show podcast feed, as well as the Lions of Liberty podcast feed, which will be our landmark show. But then for the other 2 episodes, our Monday and Friday episodes, Monday is now rebranded as the Wellness Fix, and it's entirely focused on health, wellness, all that fun stuff. And then our Friday episodes, it's our podcast now called the Sales to Success Show, which is all focused on business, entrepreneurship, sales. So I heard from the audience, they are like, Brian, I love your personal story of wellness and stuff, but I'm a politics junkie. I don't want to listen to it in the Brian Nichols Show. I said, okay. And I heard same thing for business folks, like, hey, I just want to listen to your business stuff. And then I heard from other folks who said, Brian, I just want to talk politics, right? So I said, you know what? These are 3 areas I enjoy talking about. So let's just kind of separate church and state here, right? And then actually make it so it's easier for us to have a legitimate dialogue on whatever topic we're talking about, and not have cross-pollination on accident. So folks, if you're looking for those shows, you can find them individually over on YouTube for their own pages, but also we're going to be airing the shows right here in the Brian Nichols Show, just in general. So go ahead, check those out. That's my housekeeping for today. But Ethan, final thoughts. I'll go ahead and turn things over to you. Bring us home. What do you want folks to take away from today's episode?
So I want today, especially, young people who are right-leaning, I want you to think about how we're going to win, because we're not going to win by gatekeeping and saying you can't be in this movement if you disagree with Trump on the Iran strikes, but you agree with him on everything else. We're not going to win by that. And we're not going to win if we're Nick Fuentes and we're calling people slurs and we're, saying outrageous things on Twitter and trying to get in fights and hanging out with Kanye and all these ridiculous stunts. That also is not a winning message. And above all else, when it comes to politics, it's a game of the possible, right? So we need to make as many things possible as we can. And we do that by being open, by being receptive, by being willing to make compromise and move the ball as far as we can. Brian and I have the luxury of being ideologically pure, right? We can get up here all day and talk about principles and stuff. But when we have elected,
Ethan, I've been called the Snow White of politics. That must be why, right?
Yeah. Well, hopefully that's not the case, seeing how the last Snow White movie went. But we have the luxury of being ideologues, right? We have an ideology and agenda. When it comes to leaders and politicians, they cannot be ideologically pure. They have to make compromises, and sometimes they do things we disagree with. So don't swear allegiance to them. The only litmus test is whether you are adhering to America First principles. That's the only standard we ought to hold our elected officials accountable to, and that's really what's gonna win the day at the end of it. So hold people accountable, call balls and strikes, think for yourself, and touch some grass, guys.
There you go. Ethan Watson from Young Voices. Love having you on the show, buddy. And by the way, good luck as you're going off there to law school. Really excited for you personally. I know you're going to just crush it out there, and hopefully we can see each other when I'm visiting out there in your neck of the woods. But with that being said, thank you, Ethan, for returning to the show. This is, I think, appearance number 3 or 4 now for you here in the Brian Nichols Show. No tornadoes attacking us mid-episode today. That made it easier to have a conversation, so that was good. But no, with that being said, folks, please go ahead, give Ethan some love, and of course, go check out his past interviews here on the Brian Nichols Show. We always get some positive feedback. We talked about young men trying to find their place in the world. We've talked about, the splits here in the greater Gen Z movement when it comes to the political right and left. So lots of good stuff to dig into there with our conversations with Ethan from yesteryear, yestermonth, yesterweek, whatever it may be. With that being said, folks, please go ahead and support the show. Go ahead, support our sponsors like Cardio Miracle. Scan a little QR code over my shoulder. Help us pay some bills. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and put a pin in today's conversation. Brian Nichols signing off here on the Brian Nichols Show for Ethan Watson.
Thanks for listening to the Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.